episode. Like Butters with the mummy and Randy and Towley being extremely high. It's just so confusing, but makes for an entertaining episode. Coming in at 251 is Butters' very own episode. This episode was released around the time that the creators were still testing out Butters being a main character. And it's a good episode. It's a little dark, little disturbing, but entertaining.
I can break, don't ruin all that
At 251 is Big Gay Al's Big Gay Boat Ride. This episode is the introduction of Big Gay Al, and all around a pretty funny episode. At 249 is Tom's Rhinoplasty. This is another very odd episode. There are funny moments with Mr. Garrison's nose job turning his face into David Hasselhoff, but something that put me off a little bit is the fact that Wendy murders their new teacher because she's jealous of her relationship with Stan. Yeah, a little weird. At 248 is Trapper Keeper. This is another episode that I had a vague memory of, but I didn't actually know if I made it up or not. But after I rewatched it, I think it is pretty funny with Cartman becoming the giant monster, and yeah, it's pretty good. At 247 is Quest for Ratings. As the boys join the TV production class at school, it becomes clear that all that matters to the people running the station is ratings. The boys are forced to give the people what they want in the name of ratings, meaning terrible television. I like this episode because it's a clever commentary on news stations and television just in general. At 246 is Grey Dawn. This episode parodies old people driving and how they have a reputation for not being great drivers. It's a pretty straightforward South Park parody, but it made me laugh, so upper C tier. At 245 is Stanley's Cub. I actually think this episode is very funny, and I was thinking about putting it into B tier, but the episode has a pretty horrific and dark ending, so I couldn't force myself to put it in B tier, so C tier it is. At 244, we have Gluten-Free Ebola. This episode is actually a pretty clever parody of the whole Ebola situation that was happening at the time, and it would be ranked even higher if they maybe did a little bit more with the commentary, but other than that, pretty good episode. At 243 is Asperger's. The second part of a two-part series, following the episode You're Getting Old. This episode follows Stan as he continues through this depressing phase that he's in, as well as finds time to make fun of anti-vaxxers and make a parody of The Matrix, so it's a little messy and jumbled, but it's still a pretty funny episode. At 242 is Volcano. Only the third episode in the series, this episode follows Stan and the rest of the boys as they go up a hike with his Uncle Jimbo. It has the type of humor you would expect from this early on in South Park, and all around, pretty okay. At 241 is Broadway Brodown. This episode follows Randy as he becomes a very, very big fan of plays for a very specific reason. This episode even includes some character development from Shelley, but all of that is ruined when Randy accidentally murders her new boyfriend.
Shelley, I'm sorry your little friend was killed by Spider-Man.
At 240 is Eek a Penis. This episode's rating is actually due to the contrast in the two subplots. On one hand, we have Mrs. Garrison chasing around the part she needs for her sex change operation, which I'd say is pretty dumb and pretty unfunny. But on the other hand, we have Cartman teaching a classroom of inner city kids how to get into college by cheating on their exams, which if it were its own episode, would probably be one of the best episodes in the series. But the fact that we have the Mrs. Garrison side plot really brings this episode's rating down a lot.
Hello?
Hello.
And finally, rounding out the C tier at 239, we have South Park is Gay. This episode as a whole, I'm not a huge fan of.
Pobjegli, ne znam gdje Nenad je vratno izletao u Afriku sob.
Solely because it has one of my favorite twist endings in the whole series.
Cool.
And with that, we have made it into the B tier. As I said, everything from the B tier and up I would consider pretty good episodes. Also, sorry if my analysis is a little lackluster in all of these. This is the longest tier, and I'm trying to make sure that this video doesn't end up being 5 hours long, so I'm going to try to shorten my commentaries a little bit for this section. So, to lead off the B tier at 238, we have Sons of Witches. In my opinion, this is one of the better episodes from Season 21. as I think it's pretty funny to watch Randy and all the other dumb parents accidentally summon a literal witch to take over South Park. This episode also has some pretty subtle commentary about the Hollywood sexual assault situation that was going on at the time, so all around a solid episode. At 237 is Prehistoric Ice Spin. Once again, an early episode of South Park, so the humor in it is mostly early South Park humor, meaning a lot of crude jokes.
Isprevio si lika.
Moj magarac ili ti moj sin je od jula u zatvoru, išao sam do zatvora. Isprebijao je lika koji je posle 2 dana umro od prebijanja.
Pa to ubistvo iz nehata ispada.
Ne znam, sad je tu obdukcija, traje 100 godina, jer ovaj je imao neki kapilar na mozgu koji mu je već bio pucao i što ga je uopšte što su ga uopšte pustili iz urgentnog kući i on kroz 2 dana umro ako je životno ugrožen.
Isto ti tako bilo za onu Engleskinju što je bila na operaciji smanjivanja želuca na JNA, ja mislim da je bilo. Zato što je bilo jeftinije na JNA nego u Britaniji. I oni je puste da leti nazad za Britaniju. I ona na avionskom letu nazad kući, komplikacije neke i pozlilo je dok su oni spustili, ono umrlo. Ko je sakri, hirurg, jel? Ili ona što je izašla iz bolnice. A nisu i oni rekli da može, ono, znaš, kao aj sad ti kući. Ne. Mislim da je mogla da ostane intenzivno nezi, nego nije htjela da, znaš, htjela je nazad da se vrati odmah i... Ne znam. Aj sad ti nekom zabrani da ide. Bivši kolega iz firme gdje sam radio, udario je bio glavom u kasetu, onu za preslačenje. I da li mu je pozilo, da li je u pitanju neki alkoholizam ili čuda neka, ne zna se. Uglavnom, došli su po njega bili, pozilo mu je baš bilo. Došli su po njega iz Subotice, strpali ga, jedva su ga strpali u ambulantna kola, mada ga je bilo strah. Ili je bio, ne znam, u nekoj, kao da je bunovan bio je vidio. Ili je bio pod nekim teškim alkoholistanim stanjem, nije teo vjerojatno da mu urade analizu krvi. I nekog ubede da pođe s njima i on na svoju ruku bukvalno utekne iz bolnice tamo u Subotici. I vrati se kući. Mislim da će ostati par dana tamo u bolnici na tim posmatranjima, kak je. On se vrati isti dan kući. To samo u Srbiji može. Tako da... U Srbiji ako možeš da hodaš, niko ti ne brani da ideš, čini mi se. Ako ćeš sam sebe da ubiješ, nema problema. To ti je kod nas jedino, čini mi se. Ne znam kako u drugim zemljama, ali u Srbiji je tako.
S.W.Frost is now live streaming Diablo 4 digital scammers counter so far non-event hunt showdown.
Znam da gledaš vesti. To moja pretpostavka. Gledaš vesti, vjerovatno.
Ma jok neki.
Was it worth it?
Jedino što sam sad, kad bacim pogled na TV, mogu da vidim ti je ili Keva gleda emisiju o kuvanju, cijelu utakmicu i Vučić vesti. To je to. Mogu samo da ga ugasim.
You saved my life.
And a lot of swearing. But I think
Tražio sam link za video, ali nisam uspio da nađem, uspio sam nađe neki novi za taj Stalker 2. Da lik stoji na livadi i kako nišani puca botu u glavu, tako se spomni još četvorica sa strane. Viš kako ono, tad livadi. Eno ih 10 svuda oko tebe. Depresija. Teška depresija.
I think the bit they do where they treat the man like he's been frozen for thousands of years when it's really only been a couple years is pretty funny. So, low B.
Snake, what's up? Right there.
Oh, 2 pennies?
Yep.
Plan. The forge is ready for whatever combat you need.
What are they called over there? The mini euro called pence?
They call pennies, yeah.
Pennies?
Yeah.
They're clear.
Oh.
Is this a rod shot potential or no?
No, it's
I
day.
haven't seen much of. Like I said.
Marvelous. Welcome to my channel.
Yep, we're having some fun with some teammates. I'm being the team medic. Not getting any kills. Did either of you just die? No, huh?
I had mine from the start. No,
I did.
Do I want to reach Prestige 100 as a medic? Not necessarily as a medic, just without any kills. I don't want to get any kills against enemy players.
Sadly, I think what's going to happen is like, oh, we got to put dev resources in on the res ball. Now let's nerf the, let's nerf it. We're going to make like the stand-up animation slower or something to fix
No,
it.
they better not.
Victor, I think you can like only choose that hunter.
They weren't going to touch it, but now they're going to have to.
If you look at the other quick plays, they were like I think all of them except for one person in all of the quick plays that I played was the same hunter. Yeah, they changed it. It's stupid now. Well, I guess this is it. These fun times.
It's season 4.
Hell yeah.
We'll be back.
I can put better climb on here.
4%.
That doesn't sound like much.
Stream.
Have a good one. Oh. I'll show you right now the quick play thing. What do we do about this information that we just gained?
Huh.
Will no one challenge me?
What do we do about this?
At least I can put my skills to use.
Do I make a video? Do I make a video showing that the res bolt toggles on a water ignoring ability? Tell Crytek, but they won't fix it for a year. On the bug during my no kills prestige on a challenge. I honestly feel like, considering, you know, I've said that the gameplay videos kind of don't do as well as like a reaction kind of video where I'm talking about an update or you know, something like that. The gameplay part I don't think is anything to highlight. We had some interesting games, but probably not YouTube worthy, not YouTube video worthy. So if I was gonna make a YouTube video about it, it would just be us discovering it and showcasing it. Yeah, I got you, Victor. No, they actually, I mean, I haven't really talked to Victor about it, but they actually increased the time limit for shorts. It's 3 minutes now. Yep. Well, let me see. I just Googled it and somebody said, has anyone been able to upload 3-minute YouTube shorts yet? Maybe I heard that they're going to do it. I saw in my in my YouTube like studio dashboard, I saw that it said, that 3-minute YouTube shorts are coming. I thought I heard that they were released, but maybe they're not yet, but they're coming. Right now, maybe right now it's 1 minute, but soon it's 3 minutes. How was what, 3 minutes? How's 3 minutes a short? It's still short. But I think the main thing is that it's vertical. Anyway, I guess I'm trying to think. It feels similar. Maybe it's not quite as impactful as the crouch height bug that I discovered a long time ago. But I feel like it could still be discussed. Imagine that at Scupper. It's a super minor bug. It makes for a good short for sure. Super situational. Better than having gator legs. It's, yeah, you literally ignore all water.
Ooh. Dobar bug. Ako te neko pukne sa samostrelom, onim splavom strelicom doživljavanja, zabaguje ti se karakter i možeš da bukvalno da hodaš na vodi. Da trčiš po vodi. Zanimljivo. Interesantan bug.
How strong you'll be in the tiny lake next to corn. Oh yeah. That's, I don't know, that's in a way I'm not surprised. Crazy. You could run circles around Raja. Yeah, I'm thinking, I don't know, what do I do with this? I'll think about it. Yeah, it doesn't work for solos because you got a res bolt. Yeah. Mm. You gonna stop buying gator legs? I guess the value in it, I don't know. You have to die once. All right, we're gonna get into that game. What was it? The game that I said. What game did we start? What was it again? Dark Pictures Anthology, The Devil in Me. We're gonna go. Continue that. We started that a couple days ago. And we will continue. Give me just a second. I'll be right back.
Too many!
Me. What the fuck I'm doing.
B tier. At 236, we have Chicken Lover. Yet another season 2 episode. It follows Officer Barbrady as he learns to read. Once again, just classic early South Park humor, but this one's a little bit special because I just love Officer Barbrady. I've always been a big fan of his character. And at 235, Clubhouses. And yet another season 2 episode. This episode follows the boys as they make a clubhouse with the sole intentions of playing Truth or Dare with Bebe and Wendy. I sound like a broken record, but once again, early South Park humor, but this one has a slight edge of being relatable to everyone that experienced this as a kid. Now, from the 234th to 230th spots, we have the season 20 episodes Fort Collins, Wieners Out, The Damned, Member Berries, and Skank Hunt. The reason I grouped all these together is because all of season 20 is kind of a blur to me in the sense that it all blurred together as sort of one long episode. And the only true distinction I had in the episodes was that the end of the season was worse than the beginning of the season, so that's why I put the beginning of the season here. At 229, we have #rehash. This episode is the perfect example of an episode that's just all around good. Of course, Randy being Lord and doing what he does out on the stage is pretty funny, not even to mention the Michael Jackson hologram that they hire a Tupac hologram to hunt down. All around, a solid episode. At 228, we have The Scoots. This episode is funny solely because of what it says about these e-scooter things. Anyone who lives anywhere around these e-scooters knows that they're simultaneously extremely fun and convenient, as well as extremely annoying and horribly dangerous for all the inexperienced people that ride them. So I might just enjoy this episode because I relate to it so heavily, but hey, this is my list, so. At 227, an elephant makes love to a pig. Not really sure what to say about this episode. Season 1 South Park humor, so there's not really any commentary or deeper meaning behind any of this. It's just a pretty funny episode. And really any episode where Chef is very important in the plot is a good episode in my opinion, so. This episode also introduces Mephisto, who I believe is truly an underrated character. At 226, we have Shots. Another episode that tackled the anti-vaxxer movement. I think this one did it a lot better than an episode like Asperger's, and I gotta admit, it's pretty amusing to watch Cartman run around like an oiled up pig while everyone tries to vaccinate him. At 225 is Candy Car. This episode is a commentary on all the options people have now for transportation, such as Uber and Lyft. I like that it makes the point that taxi drivers don't really have that much of a reason to complain about their business loss because they just need to improve the conditions of their taxis if they want to compete with these new options. I also love the whole Wacky Races thing at the end. Wacky Races has always been one of my favorite cartoons, so bonus points for that. At 224 is Cherokee Hair Tampons. I honestly feel like this episode is pretty underrated because not enough people praise it, but I think it deserves a lot more praise than it gets.
Bless you.
As someone who's very familiar with people who believe this kind of stuff, I think they tackled the whole holistic medicine thing very well by using Cheech and Chong pretending to be Native Americans even though they're Mexican, just selling random items and saying that they're medicine, as well as the fact that the name of the lady selling everything is misinformation. I mean, that's just comedy right there. At 223 is Obama Wins. While not quite as good as the original Obama election episode back in 2008, this episode is definitely not a bad episode as it has some funny moments like Cartman trying to rig the election with the sole purpose of being in the new Disney films, and the fact that Cartman thought the place that no one would find the ballots is a Hummer dealership, pretty funny. At 222 is Merry Christmas, Charlie Manson. This episode as a whole I would say is pretty forgettable, but the only reason I ranked it so high is being able to see Cartman's entire extended family is truly a treat that I didn't know I needed. At 221 is Super Hard Peace. As PC Principal begins to fall in love with Strong Woman, Kyle finds the time to create Millennials Against Canada, an organization meant to stop the violence that he believes that Canada is causing through television. This episode is so highly rated solely because of the parallels that it has with the South Park movie, as in the movie Kyle's mom starts Moms Against Canada for similar reasons. At 220 is Cat Orgy. More dumb early South Park humor, but all around the episode is pretty funny solely because of the dynamic that's shared between Cartman and Shelly, two people that are both psychopaths and very strong opinionated people. At 219 is D Yikes. This episode follows Mrs. Garrison as she decides that now she's a lesbian and she starts hanging out at a lesbian bar. It eventually turns into a very bizarre 300 parody and I don't know, it's just weird. At 218 is 1%. The main plot of this episode parodies the Occupy Wall Street movement, but to me the more interesting part of the episode is the subplot that follows Cartman and the destruction of his toys. It turns out at the end that Cartman is the one destroying his toys and he planned this whole elaborate thing just to grow up. It's pretty dark. At 217 we have A Boy and a Priest. This is one of a few episodes that make fun of the Catholic Church and the scandals that it's had, but in my opinion this one probably does the worst out of all of them. Not to say that this is a bad episode, it's still very funny. The other ones are just better, so that's why it's ranked here. At 216 is Dances with Smurfs. This is another classic Wendy versus Cartman episode, and I'd say one of the best parts about this episode is the fact that Wendy, for the most part, comes out on top. I also think the parody of Avatar throughout the episode is pretty dumb, but also very funny, so. At 215 is Free Will ZYX. When the boys think that the whale at SeaWorld is talking to them, they decide that they have to save it. And of course, the way that they save it is by launching it on the moon. Nothing very insightful or special about this episode, just a good, funny episode. At 214 is It's a Jersey Thing. This episode's a bit outdated now thanks to the dying out of the whole Jersey Shore fad, but if you can put your mind into that time frame, then this is actually a really well done episode. I also think the end is really funny when they get a certain group of people to help them take on the Jersey invasion.
What's the point? Can't you see it's over? Who is that?
It's Al-Qaeda!
At 2:13 is Where's My Country Gone? Season 19 was a pretty bright time for South Park in my opinion, and this episode is no exception. Before the show would get caught in the trap of making fun of Trump all the time, this season was the time when they would make fun of Trump, but do it so that it still felt like it was South Park. This episode is a perfect example of that. At 2:12 is Timmy 2000. This episode is the introduction of Timmy. I don't think I really need to say that much more. At 2:11 is Freak Strike. The main plot of this episode follows the boys trying to get Butters to wear a fake facial deformity in order to get on the Maury show. However, the episode really shines when Cartman decides that he's going to go on the Maury show and pretend to be a out-of-control teenage daughter.
I don't go to school and I kill people. Whatever. I do what I want.
At 2:10, we have Korn's Groovy Pirate Ghost Mystery. This episode is pretty bizarre as it follows the metal band Korn as they go around solving mysteries in a clear Scooby-Doo parody, but I can definitely appreciate the irony in taking a band that many people considered violent and dangerous at the time and making them do something as wholesome as solving mysteries. Also, I think it's pretty cool that the members of the band voiced their characters in this episode. At 2:09 is The Tale of Scrody Nick Boogerballs. When the boys get caught writing the most disgusting book ever written, they decide to blame it on Butters, saying that he wrote it. This of course backfires on them as all the adults love this book and all the deeper meaning that it holds, causing Butters to become an overnight superstar. It's a subtle commentary on how people tend to read a little too deeply into literature and try to find meaning where there is none. All in all, a pretty classic South Park episode. At 2:08 is Starvin' Marvin in Space. A classic episode that includes one of my favorite classic characters in Starvin' Marvin. The commentary being made on Christian missionaries and their possible ulterior motives is pretty funny. I also enjoy the fact that the aliens they meet replaced every single noun in their language with the word Marklar. Comedy genius, honestly.
Well, there is a lot of room on Marklar. If Marklar here wants to bring his Marklar to Marklar, that would be fine. Just take our Marklar back to Marklar and bring all the Marklar back with you.
Thanks.
At 207 is Raising the Bar. An episode making fun of Honey Boo Boo I think would have been a little too easy for them at this point, so the fact that they included the side plot with James Cameron basically saving the world while being extremely self-centered about it pretty much saved this episode. At 2:05 is Freemium Isn't Free. If you're someone who likes to play games on your phone even occasionally, then you can definitely relate to this one. It makes fun of those apps that are extremely pay to win that basically aren't even games, it's more just spending money for no reason. What I really enjoy in this episode, though, is Randy consistently scolding Stan over his freemium gaming addiction while trying to find ways to justify his obvious drinking problem.
Well, what about you? You're having a glass of wine.
I'm not having a glass of wine. I'm having 6. It's called a tasting, and it's classy.
At 2:05 is The Snook. This episode has a lot of funny moments in it, from Cartman, of course, being incredibly racist, to the location of the bomb being inside of Hillary Clinton. And of course the fact that it was all planned by the British to stop the American Revolution about 300 years after it started. At 2:04 is The Ungroundable. Honestly, all around this episode is just pretty okay, but the reason I have it placed so high is solely because of this one joke. At 2:03 is Cripple Fight. This episode has some very clever commentary on what was a huge issue at the time, that being the Boy Scouts banning of any openly gay adults from their organization. So when the boys' troop leader is banned for being gay, he's replaced with a new masculine one, who of course ends up being, well, you get the picture.
Now the first activity for this evening will be naked pictures.
At 2:02 is Ginger Cow. Cartman dresses a cow up as a ginger in an effort to prank Kyle, and by doing this accidentally brings peace to the Middle East and ushers in 10 years of vanity. Kyle is forced to do some pretty awful things in order to stop Cartman from telling people that it was fake. The episode makes the point that even though Kyle is doing all this good, his self-righteousness about it kind of kills any praise he gets. At 201 is Insecurity.
Marvelous.
Both storylines in this episode are
Welcome
pretty
to
funny,
my channel.
as watching every man in town
Nemo
do the
zem
best
sad
Bane
do
impression
precum
in
al
an effort
kuchmo
to
s
catch the
ikas
man
naj.
that they think their wife is cheating on them with is
kaže
pretty
ovo
comical.
baš oko
Not to
pola
mention
3,
watching
a
Cartman
ne
try to
znam
deal
će
with the
se
home
ovaj
security
javljati.
people and the absolute nightmare that is. In our
I see.
200th place, we
Watch your
have
back,
Inception. Parodying Inception is nothing new necessarily, but of course South Park does it better than anyone else. By digging deep into the subconscious of Mr. Mackey to try to find the trauma that caused his hoarding problem, they end up discovering a little more than they asked for. Also the fact that they keep confusing a sheep herder with a hoarder.
Pa neće sad za Nemačku, neće.
At 199 we have Poor and Stupid. It's kind of just a fact in South Park that any episode with a main plot that follows Cartman is going to be a good episode. Watching Cartman attempt to become a NASCAR driver by being as poor, stupid, and offensive as possible is just honestly mwah. At 198 is World War Zimmerman. Another classic Cartman episode. This one he recreates World War Z by becoming Brad Pitt and being extremely racist. When the government realizes the possible scale of this pandemic, they decide to call on the only man that they know can kill an unarmed black man better than anyone else. That, of course, is George Zimmerman.
What do you need from me? We need you to shoot a young African American for us.
I gave that up.
At 197 is The Return of Chef. This episode is kind of a farewell and middle finger to Isaac Hayes, the voice of Chef. He reportedly quit the show after they had made fun of Scientology, which was his religion. Because of that, Chef gets his brainwashed by a club that's obviously supposed to represent Scientology. And just when the boys think that they might have saved him from his brainwashing, they kill him off in the most violent way possible. Coming in at 196 is Dead Celebrities. This episode parodies The Sixth Sense by having Ike see dead celebrities all around him as ghosts. The best part of this episode is the setting that they chose for Limbo.
Boris je bio tu pričao. Vidim sad kod Huge na kanalu ima bug sa onim strelicama za oživljavanje. Ako te neko oživi sa onom plavom strelom dok si na vodi, ne možeš više da potoneš. Znaš ono kad uđeš u duboku vodu da ono sporije se krećeš i ono do pola si, valjda bukvalno trčiš po vodi. Ako te ubiju dok si na vodi, ovi te rivajuju i karakter ti se valjda ono počne da ledi iznad vode. I do kraja meča trčiš po vodi. To je bug, ali dobro. To tako ne treba da bude, koji sam da.
Watching Stan try to blame the dead bodies found in his room on the fish is pretty funny, as obviously his mother doesn't believe him, but she still tries to hide the bodies anyways. At 193 is Elementary School Musical. This episode is a perfect example of flipping the script, something I talked about in my first South Park video. When South Park becomes High School Musical, the lead actor just wants to play basketball and be a typical boy, but his flamboyant father won't allow him to not do theater. It's a funny twist that shows how absurd the whole situation is. At 192 is Up the Down Steroid. I actually don't like the main plot in this episode that much, as watching Jimmy do steroids is just kind of disturbing and out of character for him. Fortunately, this episode is saved by the side plot in which Cartman decides that he's going to join the Special Olympics in an effort to win the grand prize. While being incredibly offensive and doing his best impression of a handicapped person, he makes it in, only to realize that these handicapped kids are actually pretty good at these sports, and he gets dead last. At 191 is Margarine. In order to steal a future-telling device from the girls, the boys decide the only way is to send a boy into the female slumber party. Of course, they decide the only person to do it is Butters, so naturally they fake his death and send him to the girls' slumber party. Honestly, my favorite joke in this episode is the fact that they named Butters Margarine. Get it? Like margarine. Like fake butter. It's funny. At 190 is Jared Has AIDS. I've seen some people criticize this episode, and frankly that makes me upset, only because we have this episode to thank for making AIDS funny.
It's been 22.3 years, so AIDS is finally funny!
He's right! It's happened!
Hey, everybody! AIDS is finally funny!
All right! Woohoo! Hooray!
At 189 is the F word. I enjoyed this episode solely because it attacks an issue that I have been complaining about for years. To me, there is nothing more annoying than people that drive around in extremely loud cars or motorcycles, and this episode just goes in on Harley riders, and I appreciate that greatly. At 188 is Hell on Earth 2006. This episode follows Satan as he prepares his massive birthday party. It's obviously supposed to be a parody of My Sweet 16, and really any episode that has Satan in it is always a good one. Satan is just a great character in this show. Also, the side plot that follows Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and John Wayne Gacy doing a Three Stooges routine is darkly hilarious. At our 187th and 186th spots, we have Do the Handicap Go to Hell and Probably. This is a two-part series that parodies Christianity and the scare tactics that they tend to use to get people to do what they want. It also shows what can happen when people use religion as a means to take advantage of others. For example, when Cartman starts his own church. At number 185, we have Mexican Joker. This episode includes Randy blowing up the backyards of people who are growing their own weed, Cartman getting Kyle deported, and Cartman himself getting deported when the others find out. All around a good episode. At 184 is Little Crime Stoppers. One of my favorite tropes that the show uses is roping the kids into something that they clearly don't want to be part of. This episode is a great example of that. The kids are playing detective and they end up becoming actual detectives and having to go through all the trials and tribulations that come with that. At 183 is Christmas Snow. South Park bans all sale of alcohol due to all the drunk driving incidents that have been happening. So of course, Randy decides the town needs a little bit of integrity back. And by integrity, he of course means lots and lots of cocaine.
I know, it's wrong.
No. What is the white stuff on the marijuana?
Oh, that's cocaine.
At 182 is Go Fund Yourself. This episode parodies both the backlash that came with the name of the Washington Redskins football team, as well as the culture that's become of crowdfunding projects that are pretty much meaningless. It does a pretty great job of parodying both by combining them together into one solo plot. At 181 is season finale. In this episode, Randy has to pay for the destruction he caused by blowing up all the weed farms in people's backyards. He's arrested and sent to jail. This causes the rest of his family to realize the possibilities that they have with Randy out of the picture. I enjoy how they portray the family as celebrating Randy's arrest rather than mourning it. At number 180 we have A Cause for
Ima razmišljao da uzme drugi kompjuter pa da proda ovaj što ima da uzme drugi. Ja mu kažem da ne mora to da radi, može samo zameni procesor i grafičku kartu. Ako će. Nema potrebe čitavu mašinu da...
Pa da.
Imam četiri ploču, može ja sam gledao da ploča podržava do ovoga procesora koji ja imam sa njim. Ja nema potrebe da pola kompjutera, to jest da prodaje, razumeš išta, može samo da meni CPU i grafičku. Mislim da je prvo da igra Baldur's Gate 3 i da ono ne ide baš sjajno, mislim taj računar ima kod njega RX 570. Nije on igrao nešto ni mnogo zahtevne igre, igrao neke strategije i to, ali probaj da igra nešto novije i jebi. Ja sam rekao da uzme drugu grafičku i procesor najvjerojatnije. To zavisi koliko će da se otvori za novčanik. Kad sam da ne mora da uzme ništa ispod grafičke koju ja imam.
To je.
Ili ne, 30, 70, 30, 80, znam. Ne znam koliko su sad Nvidia kartice. Nikad nisu bile, pa ne znam da li su sad. Pa ne verujem, kažem nikad nisu bile jeftine, ne verujem da su sad jeftinije. Budući da sad imaš seriju 4000, ču mi se sam čitao da je serija 3022. Ako možeš negdje da nađeš povoljno. He learns that the ugly kids are busy developing skills that will help them later in life. Meanwhile, the kids that are labeled hot are having everything handed to them, and they're not developing any sort of life skills. It's a pretty dark commentary, but a good episode. At 173 is Cow Days. Honestly, not much to say about this episode. An old episode, it's kind of funny all around.
Okay, coming in at 172 is The Magic Bush. This episode comments on several different topics, including privacy and racial tensions. There are some clever references to events that were happening at the time by using drones instead of humans. I also think it's funny that Steven believes his drone is like possessed or haunted or something before he believes that Butters might have touched it after he told him not to. At 171 is Let Go, Let Gov. Cartman decides he needs to become a whistleblower and expose the NSA on their practices. However, when he eventually reveals what the NSA is doing, it turns out that no one really cares that much because everyone kind of expected it anyways. Good episode. At 170 is P. Anyone who's ever been to a water park can relate to this episode. It parodies disaster movies and all around is a pretty gross episode, but the over-the-top grossness is really what makes this episode funny. At 169 is Reverse Cowgirl. This episode reignites the age-old debate of the toilet seat, whether it should be the man's responsibility or the female's responsibility to put down the toilet seat. After Clyde's mom repeatedly blames him for leaving the toilet seat up, she eventually dies because of it. This sparks insane new safety measures similar to that of the TSA in everyone's bathroom. I like the commentary about how quick we're willing to go to these extreme measures when something happens. At 168 is the China Problem. Ignoring the rather disturbing side plot, the main plot of Cartman believing that China is going to take over the US after watching the opening ceremony for the Olympic Games is pretty funny since he decides that the way to stop them is to go to P.F. Chang's. At 167 is the Mexican Staring Frog of Southern Sri Lanka. As Jesus' daytime talk show is losing in the ratings to Jimbo and Ned's Huntin' and Killin', Jesus' manager tells him how he needs to become a little more extreme in order to compete with Jimbo and Ned. This eventually leads to Jesus' show basically becoming the Jerry Springer show. This episode also includes the Vietnam veterans talking about what Vietnam was like, and I think that's pretty funny. At 166 is Cartman's Incredible Gift. After Cartman suffers a major head injury, he wakes in the hospital where the police realize that he could be used to help solve crimes. Of course, he would help by using his telepathic abilities that he developed from his head injury. Unsurprisingly, all of his visions are food-related because he's fat. At 165 is How to Eat with Your Butt. This episode is a perfect example of a dumb South Park episode where the dumbness plays to its humor. The basic plot is that Kenny takes a school picture with his butt sticking out of his hood instead of his face, and an actual family who have butts for faces think that Kenny could be their long-lost son. Meanwhile, when Cartman sees the people with butts for faces, he realizes it's the funniest thing he's ever seen, and he no longer has the ability to laugh at anything. A very dumb episode, but a funny one at that. At 164 is Unfulfilled. This is one of several episodes in Season 22 that tackle Amazon and their practices, and this is one of the better ones. The Amazon workers in the town decide to go on strike, but it becomes clear immediately that no one can get their packages anymore. It's a commentary on how no one is really willing to sacrifice anything for any causes they believe in, as well as show just how replaceable each worker is in a system like Amazon's. A pretty dark episode, but a funny one at that. At 163 is Fun with Veal. When the boys discover that Veal is just tortured baby cow, they perform a heist and decide to rescue all the baby cows from the local farm. They end up holding the cows hostage and have a massive standoff with police. At that moment, Stan makes the pact that he's never going to eat meat again. He also begins to get very sick, and when the cows are finally captured, it reveals that he was just moments away from turning into a giant. Well, let's just say the creators have a strong opinion on people who don't eat meat.
If we hadn't stopped it in time, Stan would have eventually just become one great big giant pussy.
At 162 is Butt Out. To me, this episode is very underrated because it takes a controversial stance on a very big issue. It's about big tobacco and how, while they're definitely not saints, the people demonizing them are often worse than them themselves, as they're just bullying and lying to people to get them to believe what they believe. It's a very controversial take on the issue, and while I know a lot of people don't agree with it necessarily, I respect the confidence it takes to show a message like that. At 161 is Red Sleigh Down. When Cartman realizes that there's basically no chance that he's going to be on the nice list for Santa this year, he decides he needs to do whatever it takes to get on the nice list. This eventually leads to his attempt to bring Christmas to Iraq, in which Santa ends up getting tortured and he accidentally gets Jesus killed. I don't think that would exactly put him on the nice list. This episode also reintroduces Kenny after he was gone all this season, so that's pretty great.
Well, all in all, I have to say this was a pretty special Christmas. Oh, hey, Kenny. Dude, where have you been?
What is this?
At 160 is Tegrity Farms. Randy finally decides it's time to leave South Park, and he moves out into the country and starts a weed farm. Meanwhile, vaping has become an epidemic among the kids at school. Randy hates all this new vaping stuff and decides to take him down with a little bit of integrity. At 159 is Here Comes the Neighborhood. Token is tired of being the only rich kid in town, and he encourages his family to start doing things that the rest of the kids in school do, like shopping at J-Mart. He realizes
So
The wolves have lived in the shade of Chaldeum, protecting Kyrgyzstan from all that threaten her. Yet, even they can only do so much. The path south has become overrun. Yes, the oasis is beautiful. But more than that, it felt safe. That's why we stayed.
Asa, please. Your wounds are still fresh.
You can bind them again when I return. A generous...
Well...
To survive in the... When an The Iron Wolves... So? The dead await...
We do what we can for them. But the evil... Akarat be with you. You may need it. When is there not...
If it's so...
See?
What do you mean they attacked again? I just cleared that field.
I'm paying you to keep them out. Not sit here and eat while they swarm over and over.
Yeah, I'll head over there again. Just let me finish my meal first.
I checked everywhere, sir. Dawood is not in camp.
Do I?
Our scouts are occupied in the north and the west. If a threat appears in the south, we've no one left to confront it.
The forge is ready for whatever you need. Don't ruin all that work, huh?
Oh. A zemući.
If I cannot be in the wilderness, this will do.
Kettle's hot. What do you need?
Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum.
Why are you here? You can't trust demons, not even a half-human one.
Better to be a monster on the outside than lie about the one on the inside, like you humans do.
Da. Dobro.
Pa je.
What's left, you ask?
Beware the envious, my friend.
Znači tako, stalkerčina, a?
Get out of here. Stalker. Ko je stalker?
Naš moj.
A, naš Miljan.
Naš moj, njegov. Naš moj, njegov.
Okay.
Pateru. Pateru. Gdje si ga? Ti bi jedna mala pučka. Pokvarati. Gdje je? Ima.
Magic is neither good nor evil. How may I help you?
More there than I thought. Poor man must have his hands full.
Onda će da odleži jedno 3 do 6. Onda će da odleži jedno 3 do 6 godina.
36.
If I cannot be in the wilderness.
3 do 6.
A znam. Mislim da se zezam sa situacijom, nego ne verujem da se to desiti.
Šta, ne verujem?
Ne verujem da se to desiti.
Bio u samici, nedelju dana. Poslije restartuo neki lik, jer je krenuo četkicom za zube koju je nosio ko noć. I ovaj ga izlomio ko vola, je umatio, ubio. Bio 7 dana u samici. Pa on i žena su bili kod komšije na kafi na neko piće. I ovaj navodno nije imao šećera i Andrej je izašao da kupi šećer i kad se vratio vidio otvoren muranac i zavuče unutra pare, unutra ruku nema para. A nije videla otkud. I Andrej tu malo pala klasna, raspizdio ga i ovaj izvadio nož i zabao Andreja u rame. I onda ga je Andrej izlomio ko stoku i tako ga je pukao zadnji put da je ovaj izleteo kroz prozor, jer je razbio prozor i izleteo napad. I sad se isekao od stakla i držali su ga taj dan u urgentnom i pustili ga kući. E sad to može da bude olakšavajuća okolnost ako on životno ugrožen od prebijanja, onda se ne pušta kući i pustili ga kući i ovaj kroz 2 dana umre. Umro. Prestao da diše, zaboravio je disati, znaš. I onda su mu se ugasili organi kad je prestao da diše, znaš, pošto nije dobio snabdevanje.
Better than starting from nothing. There's a good one.
I onda su uhapsili i Andreja i njegovu ženu. Onda je pretrano fizički jak, on šamar da ti udare, slomit će ti nos, jebi ga, znači... Tako da njegovi udarci nisu ni malo bezazleni. Redi skole, on u lemu ispio, zube i lomio vinče, nosio i postao. Od onog vaterpola raskupi i on nije svestan koliko je jako od onog vaterpola. Pa ništa. Pa smo onda doveli do ovog državnog advokata što su mu dodelili.
That's the spirit. Give it a go.
Nema veze s vezom, jebote, tako da sam sad zvao ovog mog advokata da preuzme odredi, pa koliko košta košta.
Hello? Shame that.
Not a bad...
Hello?
Too bad, friend.
Well, hello, shining beauty. Shame that.
Not a bad pull, that.
All finished, are you? better than starting from nothing.
A jebi ga, šta da radim?
Šta ne valja?
Baš to je Andriju u zatvoru.
A jebi.
A dobro, bar mu je Saškin brat olakšao, pošto ga tamo čačkao neki od starijih. Pa je, rekao Saški još se nađu tamo određene ljudi i sad ga niko živ ne zna. I da svi mu se smeškaju i pitaju da mu treba nešto. Nego što ga je jedna budala neki tamo neki koji krenuo sada Milanu nešto za zube naoštrio ko bodež jebote. I provocirao ga, isikao mu patike i krenuo na Andreja tim jednom vode i Andrej poludio i izlomio ga ko budalu. Izlomio ga bukvalno, to bio 7 dana u stanici. Nisu jasni ljudi, znači ja prvi da vidim čoveka od 1,85 m i 130 kg mišića, jebote. Znači, znaš kad bi ja smeo da krenem na njega? Znači, on fizički samo da mi pukne šamar, odvalit će mi glavu, jebote. Mi jasno ko sme da kreće na nekog tako. Ne znam šta ti misliš, Milane, ili Nenade po tome, ali ja ne bi smeo. To mi nikad neće biti jasno.
Beware the envious, my friend.
I šta kažu, koga će da ga...
Pa ne znam šta tu ima to sranja nekih, zašto je ovaj pušten posle prebijanja, on je kroz 2 dana umro kad je pušten kući, znači ako je bio životno ugrožen, nije trebao da bude pušten kući. Drugo, on je prvi krenuo nožem na Andreja, znači, i kako se ova advokatica što mu je dodeljena od države neka bubuleja, pa sam sad odneo papire sve mom advokatu da on preuzme odavde. U Nemačku. U Njemačku. Nego ima daš problema u početku, pošto Ana, hvala imaju. Sam onda rekao sad pozove brata, pa i ovi su pozvao određene ljudi tamo i dalje nije. Nije baš sve jedno kad ih on nazove. Kontaš, ne radi.
I forged more than horseshoes and nails. What do you need?
A debre, tako, brat, overeni ubice iz Legije stranaca, kriminalni dosije kod 2000.
Dobar čovjek.
Kaže, Saska, volim ga ko najviše na svetu, mi je rođeni brat, ali da je psiho, je kaže. Da je psiho, nije baš i lik sa kojim se treba zajebavati.
Ništa mu ne pojačam odbranu.
A?
Kaže da mora pojačati odbranu.
Bube me napadaju.
Pa ti koristi insekticid neki.
Mora, smislim nešto.
Da si ti nesto čitav dan, čovjek ne može te dobije ni...
Išao sam do požarete nešto.
Dobro, znači nisi bio kući. Ne moraš u detalje da pričaš, samo kažeš nisam bio kući.
Ja bi bio tu.
Meni ne moraš izvještaj da podnosiš. Samo sam ono malo da znam. Pošteno. Cenim što nam kažeš detalje, ali ne zadirem ljudima u intim. Samo kažeš nisam kući.
Oh. Koliko je teško da se izbalansirao, majko moju.
You lose a little mass to dust.
Ova planeta, ona...
Da?
Mnogo teško se izbalansira proizvodnja bakterija i svega. Da.
Napade prijedna planeta.
Da. Da izbalansiraš proizvodnju bakterija, onih nutrijenta za njih i to.
The stars made manifest.
Možda je predviđeno da startuješ na maloj skali, a ne na velikoj kao što ti radiš. Znam kako igraš. Džaba mi objašnjavaš. Ti si megalomanijak. Ne megaloman, megalomanijak. Ti bi teo da jedino imaš milijardu. A vjerojatno ti igra nudi nešto malo na kašiku. To je moja pretpostavka.
Da sedimo.
Heard they found Erida and the Fane. Such an evil mess. Liars or not, they were the best we had. What hope we got now?
Verovatno. Ovo.
This should be interesting.
Yes. Imamo liti jedan, ne znam, gledaj se.
pola 3 bek.
Će nam neđe rastrugnuti.
Pa je, a to je to. Ne zajebao. Tu exploit za pare.
Šta će ti exploit za pare, Kesiću? Stalkeri se sponu ispred tebe na metu.
Ba.
Imaš tamo klip gdje lik stoji na livadu i ispred njega se poljuju neprijatelji, jedan za drugim. Kakav ti exploit treba? Šta god. Ja.
Čekaj, sad upalim ovaj stream. Čekaj, ne stekšiti. Share stream, ja.
Ješt. I piše Hunt Showdown. Jer očigledno igra Hunt Showdown, je li tako, Kesi?
To piše.
Piše. Jer ne znam da promeni na Stalker.
Ne možeš si na Stalkera promeniti, a ne Hunt Showdown. A šta ti je ovo, grom neki, šta ti je ovo? Ma gore ova puška, šta ti je ovo?
A to je napravio za Hunt Showdown nekom tu sliku. Je li ona ikonica?
Grom S14.
Automatska puška. Kako to da ne koristiš shotgun? Kao pušku.
A piše ti Grom S14, prodaj. Tamo. A šta ti je to? Dobro, dobro. Ali ti si ostao bez svega toga. Kako to je, vod? A... Znam tačno će taj lik.
Was it worth it?
Da. A kako to je, vod? Jer nije mi jasno šta se...
Lič. Znači...
Pa sad ti para ne može falit. Pa prodaj mu sad. A šta ti duplira? Metkovi, jel? Pa dobro se ja čujem preko ovoga, šta znam. Jel da, Beka? Napravio si most preko reke. A vidim dole ti nešto izbacilo. A prihvatit će oni te takve. Samo ne smiju biti crvene, mogu žute oštećene.
Mislim ispod 40% ne može. Znaš? Kesić.
A ja sam i žute prodava tako. Vidiš da ti žuta u ćošku stoji žuto kao, vidiš gore. A jest, ali isto ti treba dosta para da ih opraviš, vjerojatno si na istom onda. A ne, onda popravi, šta ćeš? Pa to je. Četrnaest skoro viš. Da. Doda još nešto, slabosti tu doda. Prodaj sve, idi ovamo, F stisni. Da bi metko... Nešto ti tu nisi, ja, ili si nešto...
Jebo.
A gdje ti je ona puška treća? Što si opravio? Grom onaj. E, to nisi stavio bio, viš. Pištolj nisi opravio. A stavi više metkova, divo ćeš više para dobiti kad staviš, prodaj sve metkove. A realno sad toliko para možeš kupiš što hoćeš. Ti sad možeš i da farmaš pare, kupuješ od njega, prodaješ tu.
Ne može. Ne radi se tako.
I've been practicing.
Dobar dan.
Dobro, gdje si, Demon, kad ne radiš tamo, silne probleme.
Did I count it out right? I like seeing what Papa's friends collect. Add that, carry the one. I'll try to make this quick. Did I count it out right?
he's never going to be able to relate to everyone else in South Park, so instead he decides to invite a bunch of rich kids to South Park. The episode slowly turns into a commentary about race, as all the rich people that come to South Park are also black. The townspeople decide that they don't like all these rich people being around, and they find different ways to chase them out that end up looking pretty racist, even though they're not intended to be. At 1:58 is Worldwide Recorder Concert. When the boys are forced to play the recorder at a concert, they become very interested in finding the brown note, which is the note that when played makes you crap your pants. Meanwhile, Mr. Garrison visits his parents, where he confronts his dad about the sexual abuse issues in his family. Of course, this being Mr. Garrison, the issue is that his dad didn't sexually assault him as a child, which made him think that he didn't love him. This is a pretty insane episode all around, but it's a pretty good one. At 1:57 is The Ring. This episode does a good job of satirizing the way that Disney simultaneously markets sex to children while pretending that they're against it. They get away with it by giving people like the Jonas Brothers purity rings so that they can officially say that they're against it. It's a pretty great commentary, and this episode also introduces Mickey Mouse as a character, so that's pretty good. At 1:56 is Holiday Special. Randy becomes an advocate of destroying anything Christopher Columbus related, like statues and anything celebrating him. It later comes out that Randy actually has a history of dressing up as Christopher Columbus and sort of glorifying him. This is obviously a reference to the blackface scandal that was taking place at the time, and I think it's pretty clever. Not to mention the way Randy tries to convince everyone he's Native American is pretty gross and funny.
We got separated.
At 1:55 is Tweak X Craig. When the Asian girls at school start drawing Tweak and Craig in a gay relationship, and everyone in town falls in love with their relationship, they have to deal with the consequences of that. It has some clever commentary on the stigma behind gay relationships and how they function in today's society. It also includes Randy believing that Asian people actually choose who's gay, and I think that's pretty funny. At 1:54 is Man, Bear, Pig. This episode is not only iconic, but hilarious, as it parodies Al Gore and his self-righteous attitude. He's preaching about the dangers of Man, Bear, Pig, not because he actually really cares about it, but only because he wants everyone to think he's super cool for it. This episode would be higher rated if it weren't for the fact that it's kind of outdated, since Man, Bear, Pig is meant to represent global warming, and they're kind of saying the whole time that there's not really any proof that Man, Bear, Pig exists, when now we know that obviously global warming is real. But other than that, great episode. At 1:53 is Sexual Healing. This is another episode that I think is actually pretty underrated. This episode parodies the trend we tend to see where rich and famous men tend to become a bit promiscuous after they become rich and famous. And what really makes this episode so funny is all the men in the episode pretending like they wouldn't be doing the same thing if they had the ability to. Going to absolutely insane lengths to prove that it must be some kind of problem, not just that that's inherently men. At 1:52 is 4th grade. One of the only times in the show when the boys show any kind of aging. This episode includes them getting promoted from 3rd grade to 4th grade. It also includes the introduction of Miss Cho Sunday, who, even though isn't a very likable character, ends up being very important to several episodes. At 1:51 is The Entity. Kyle's cousin Kyle comes to town, and he happens to be an extreme stereotype of a Jew. The boys decide that he's super lame and try to do whatever it takes to get rid of him. This includes tying him to a bus and trying to feed him to a bear. Also, watching Cartman unsuccessfully try to hold back any insults he has towards Kyle for being a Jew is pretty hilarious.
Kyle, I need you to be quiet. In my class, you need to be able to concentrate. Concentration is the key to succeeding in my class.
Maybe we'll have to send him to concentration camp. Ah! Damn it! Cartman!
At 1:50 is Crazy Cripples. When Jimmy and Timmy see Christopher Reeve on TV getting tons of praise for being crippled, they become upset about it since Christopher Reeve wasn't born crippled, he became crippled. This causes them to want to start a group for people crippled from birth, and of course, they decide to name it the Crips. When they're informed that that group already exists, they go join them. This is a pretty silly episode, and watching Timmy and Jimmy fit in perfectly with all the Crips is great. At 1:49 is About Last Night. This episode manages to be a clever commentary on the polarization of politics nowadays that is only more relevant now, while simultaneously being an insane heist movie parody where Obama only got into office to perform the biggest heist of all time. A classic, dumb South Park premise that creates a great episode. At 1:48 is Die Hippie Die. Any longtime fans of South Park would know that if there's one thing Eric Cartman hates the most, it's probably hippies. Luckily in this episode, it comes in handy, as South Park is turned into Woodstock 2.0 as the hippies take over with their music festival. Cartman and the team that he develops has to go in and destroy the heart of the hippie festival to end it all. All around a dumb, funny episode. At 147 and 146, we have Nobody Got Cereal and Time to Get Cereal. As mentioned a couple episodes ago, Man Bear Pig is used in South Park to represent global warming. During these two episodes, Man Bear Pig is going on a tear throughout the city, just absolutely murdering and destroying everything in his path. All the while, there are still people in the town that are refuting the fact that he even exists. The boys realize that they have to team up with the one person who knew about Man Bear Pig before anyone else. Of course, that's Alboy. These episodes are interesting because it kind of feels like this is the only time that South Park has ever truly apologized for something. Like, it's pretty clear that they're trying to tell Al Gore that they're kind of sorry for what they did to him and how they ridiculed him despite him being right the entire time. It's something that I never really expected South Park to do. Also, the subplot of Detective Yates playing Red Dead Redemption 2 the entire time is pretty funny. At 145 is City Sushi. As I mentioned before, basically any episode with Luke Kim as a main character is bound to be a good one. Watching the back and forth racism between him and the city sushi owner is pretty hilarious considering they both sound the same to the average viewer. And the side plot with Butter's multiple personalities is pretty funny, not to mention the twist ending in the end that caught everyone off guard, I think. At 144 is Truth and Advertising. The last 3 episodes of Season 19 are all very good episodes, and though this one is ranked lower than the other ones, it's still great. This episode follows mainly Jimmy and his fight against ads. Watching Leslie eventually backstab him is pretty funny, considering the events leading up to it, and the whole subplot with Mr. Garrison and Caitlyn Jenner is pretty odd, but pretty funny too. At 143 is Two Guys Naked in a Hot Tub. Another very odd episode. This one follows Stan as he's forced to go along to a meteor shower party with his parents. The party gets a little too crazy, and Randy ends up doing some questionable things in the hot tub. The emotional attachment that Gerald develops is a pretty funny take on the classic cliche of the woman after the one-night stand. Not to mention the C plot, where the police believe that the house is full of cult members planning to commit mass suicide. All around a great episode. At 142 is Cartman Gets an Anal Probe. Well, we finally got to the episode that started it all, the pilot. I know a lot of South Park fans aren't big fans of this episode, or really seasons 1 through 3 in general, and I recognize that the humor in this episode isn't anything insightful or any sort of commentary on anything, but I just can't bring myself to put this episode any lower because this episode is really what started it all. Without the crude and offensive humor that we get in this episode, we wouldn't have South Park, and I think that's really important. At 141 is Proper Condom Use. This episode has some pretty clever commentary on sexual education and at what age it should be taught. It also comments on things like scare tactics that are often used by adults with an agenda, and how not only are they ineffective, but they're very harmful. This is the perfect example of what South Park does best, which is hide an insightful message underneath a blanket of crude and offensive humor. At 140 is Informative Murder Porn. Another episode with a pretty insightful message, this time about the possible effects of violent media on the youth. They use the classic role reversal technique that I've talked about in my other videos. Because in this episode, it's about the parents becoming violent due to the programming they're watching on television. Meanwhile, the kids have developed an interest in the very peaceful and not very violent video game Minecraft. In 139th place is You're Not Yelping. If you can't tell by now, I'm a pretty big fan of Season 19 in its entirety. What makes this episode successful is Cartman being Cartman. Cartman is always willing to take advantage of any system that'll benefit him in any way. And in this episode, he recognizes that Yelp is his tool to get all the free food that he wants. By becoming a Yelp critic, he can indulge himself in any type of food he wants at any time with no wait, due to his threatening of giving a 1-star review. The episode also has a very satisfying ending. At 138 is The Poor Kid. Honestly, all around, this episode is kind of forgettable, but it's placed this high solely for a few reasons. Number 1, Kenny plays Mysterion in this episode, which, I mean, how can you dislike that? But the main reason this episode places so high is because of the strictly agnostic bit. For some reason, to me, the irony in being strictly agnostic is just really, really funny. I don't know why, but solely because of that, it places this high.
As long as you live here, you will be agnostic. These are your foster brothers and sisters. They are all strict agnostics. David, do you believe in God?
I don't know.
Right!
At number 137 is Weight Gain 4000. Now, I'll be the first to admit that this episode actually isn't even really that good. It's an average episode at best. But once again, for some reason, one specific joke is just so funny to me. And that joke is Cartman repeating the word beefcake over and over again.
And say it with me! Beefcake!
Beefcake.
Beefcake!
Beefcake.
Beefcake!
Beefcake. Beefcake. Beefcake.
He needs to run his ass around the block a few times.
Yes, I recognize that it makes no sense to place it this high solely because of this one joke, but it's my list, okay? Leave me alone. At 136 is WTF. Honestly, both plots in this episode are hilarious. The main plot that follows the boys creating their own wrestling league works because the running gag that they have throughout the episode where the word wrestling is used interchangeably with acting. Not to mention the side plot of the wrestling instructor who is very intent on clearing up wrestling's name.
This is wrestling! This! Mister, you better take your gay porn and walk right out of this bar.
At 1:35 is the city part of town. Gentrification is the main topic of this episode as Randy decides that they need a Whole Foods in the town. He decides the best way to go about this is by revitalizing the poor, rundown area of town, aka Kenny's house. Thus, Soda Sopa is born. At 1:34 is My Future Self and Me. The parents of South Park decide that they want to discourage their kids from doing any bad behavior as early as possible. So they hire actors that pretend to be their children from the future. These actors pretend that their lives are now horrible thanks to the poor decisions they made as a kid. Honestly, the best part of this episode is watching the parents go to extreme lengths to not admit to their children that they're lying to them.
Why, his hand did disappear! He is you from the future! Oh, Jesus Christ, help me!
That's weird because I didn't really cut off my hand, it was fake.
Look, it was fake in the future, too!
Looks like you better really watch out for marijuana, huh, Stan?
At 1:33 is Cartman's mom is still a dirty slut. The first real episode of season 2. Yes, I'm aware that Terrence and Phillip is technically the first episode, but you know how I feel about that one. This episode follows up on the cliffhanger that we were left on at the end of season 1, in which Cartman's true father is to be revealed. It is eventually revealed in this episode that Cartman doesn't actually have a father. In fact, his mother is actually his father since she's a hermaphrodite. Such a bizarre twist, but I expect nothing less from South Park. And finally, to round out the B tier, oh my god, just the B tier, Jesus. Anyways, to round out the B tier, we have Cancelled. This episode begins as a near carbon copy of the pilot episode. That's because, as it's later revealed, Earth is just a reality TV show for the rest of the galaxy, and this is a rerun. This is a great episode with many callbacks to the first episode and tons of great content and commentary. Alright, well, we made it to the A tier. Those of you that have stuck around and watched this far, thank you, I appreciate it. I wouldn't have done the same, I have a very short attention span, but respect to you. Now let's get started on the A tier, starting with number 131, Hooked on Monkey Phonics. This episode makes fun of homeschooling and the fact that homeschool kids often don't really develop correct social abilities. All around, it's just a pretty funny episode. I know a lot of people don't think it deserves to be A tier, but I rewatched it recently and I thought it was pretty funny, so I put it in A. At number 130 is Mr. Hankey's Christmas Classics. I'm sure this will also be an unpopular opinion, but I actually really enjoy this episode. I recognize that it's just Christmas songs and a lot of them aren't that great, but there's some really good songs in here. For example, the dreidel song has literally been stuck in my head since I heard it years ago, and for that reason alone, I think it deserves to be an A tier. At 129 is Death. You know, I'm starting to realize that I may have some pretty unpopular opinions about what episodes I find good. The reason I like this episode so much is it kind of feels like a precursor to what would become the South Park movie. It plays off the idea of parents' willingness to blame anything but themselves for their children's bad behavior, and does a pretty good job of that. Not quite as good as the South Park movie, but a solid starter. At 128 is Basic Cable. Honestly, the main appeal of this episode has nothing to do with any sort of commentary or political values in it. The best part of this episode is the actions of the cable providers. Anyone who has ever had to truly deal with a cable provider will understand how frustrating that process is, and this episode encapsulates it perfectly. Watching the workers quote-unquote rush to get to places while simultaneously being as slow as possible is just the most relatable thing I've probably ever seen on TV. At 127 is Mecha Streisand. For some reason, Matt and Trey really dislike Barbra Streisand. They've said in interviews before that she's one of the celebrities they hate the most. That really comes through in this episode as they just ruthlessly go after her. Eventually it becomes a kaiju film parody where she becomes a giant robot named Mecha Streisand that's just terrorizing the town. It's truly wacky and bizarre, but it's a great episode. At 126 is Fantastic Easter Special. Another very, very bizarre episode, but also a very entertaining one at that. It's kind of a parody of the Da Vinci Code, and it gets so convoluted and insane that it ends up with Jesus killing the Pope. Yeah. At 125 is Spontaneous Combustion. This episode is a commentary on the public's desire to find an answer for every bad thing that happens, and it does a pretty good job at making fun of that. But what really makes this episode shine is the fact that the boys end up crucifying Cartman, and they just leave him up there for a couple days. It's pretty great to watch, I'm not gonna lie. At 124 is Doubling Down. What is undoubtedly the best episode of season 21, and an episode I think is very underrated, as a lot of people didn't really like the episode. It follows Heidi as she keeps running back to Cartman, since everyone keeps telling her that she made a horrible decision in being with Cartman at all. Therefore, it makes her insecure and feel stupid about what she did. This, of course, just causes her to double down on her decision to be with Cartman. What I think a lot of people didn't catch about this episode is this is actually supposed to be political commentary on the Trump campaign. The message is to those who are constantly demonizing and hating on people who support Trump. Basically saying by demonizing the opposition, you're causing them to become more and more alienated and more distant and less likely to change. It's a political message that I've agreed with for quite some time now, and I feel like more people should get on board with. At 123 is Mr. Hanky the Christmas Pooh. This is an episode that's even more relevant today than it was back in the day. It's an early example of satirizing political correctness and the culture behind it, and it also introduces Mr. Hanky, who's just a classic character. At 122 is Fat Camp. In this episode, they comment on a couple different things. In the A-plot, Cartman is sent to Fat Camp and does whatever it takes to not change. It becomes a commentary on weight loss and how it truly is possible for anyone that really puts their mind to it. Meanwhile, Kenny basically becomes a whore as he's doing disgusting things that anyone can do for money. It's a parody of the people that do that kind of stuff for money. People like Jackass. No hate on Jackass, by the way. I love Jackass. At 121 is The Sissy. Once again, Cartman takes advantage of a controversial subject just for his own benefit. In this one, it's transgendered people using the bathrooms of the genders they believe they are. This is just a perfect example of a classic South Park episode. It makes a statement while not being preachy, but simultaneously being extremely funny.
Favor.
At 120 is Whale Wars. After Stan witnesses the Japanese murdering whales and dolphins across
Incriminating
the world,
cutting.
he decides he needs to do something about
Welcome
it,
to my channel. Cheap viewers
and
stream.com remove the space.
Try to stop the whalers. He takes over and does whatever it takes to stop those whalers. I also enjoy the point that they make at the end of this episode.
Great job, son. Now the Japanese are normal like us.
At 119 is Bloody Mary. Randy becomes deathly ill with alcoholism, and when it's revealed that there's a miracle currently going on with a Mary statue that's bleeding out of, well, yeah. He decides that he needs to go to this statue so that he can be healed of his illness. And of course, this completely heals him of any of his urges of alcohol. Then, of course, when it's revealed that it wasn't actually a miracle, he reverts to his alcoholism almost immediately, because all that stopped him was the fact that it was a miracle. The message here is pretty obvious, and I think it's a great one. At our 117th and 118th spots, we have Pandemic and Pandemic 2: The Startling. There's so much to talk about in these two episodes that I'll just go through a couple of the best parts. Arguably, the main reason for these episodes being as high as they are is the fact that Craig is the main character in these episodes, and it's the first time we really get to see the personality of Craig. His monotone and nihilistic reactions to almost everything that happens are just perfect. It just works with the story so well. Meanwhile, watching Randy do parodies of Cloverfield and the Blair Witch Project is pretty hilarious. Also, the massive guinea pigs that have the potential to destroy the world. That's a pretty fun touch. At number 116 is Night of the Living Homeless. This episode is a parody of Night of the Living Dead, where instead of zombies taking over, homeless people overwhelm the town of South Park. It has all the classic cliches of a zombie movie, but also includes some funny jokes to remind you that these are actual homeless people and not zombies. One thing I'll just never understand about this episode, though, is why Kyle is so interested in watching Cartman jump over homeless people with a skateboard. Like, he really just seems borderline obsessed.
Oh, we're not having Cartman jump any more homeless people, Kyle. That isn't my idea!
At number 115 is the Human Sentai Pad. Kyle forgets to read the terms of service for the new iTunes update and ends up getting put into a human Sentai Pad, which is a grotesque creation in which 3 people are sewn mouth to anus, in order to power an iPad, of course. This is in reference to the film Human Centipede, in which this happens. What makes this episode so funny is everyone pretending like Kyle is so insane for not reading the terms of service, even though obviously no one actually reads the terms of service. Also the fact that this doesn't seem too far off from something Apple would actually do nowadays. At 114 is the biggest douche in the universe. In this episode, they brutally attack John Edwards, who is a supposed medium with a TV show. Stan goes on to reveal that he's really just using a trick called cold reading, which has been used by mediums for centuries. Stan accuses him of not only being a douche, but being the biggest douche in the universe, to which it is later revealed that he actually won the award for biggest douche in the universe, so congratulations to him. At 113 is Conjoined Fetus Lady. This is another episode that isn't all that memorable, but the main reason it's up this high is for one joke. This is a bit that actually has gotten popular again recently due to TikTok, but most people don't even realize it's a reference to South Park. That, of course, is the Chinese commentators pretending to be racist towards Americans.
Hey, you want to hear my impersonation of Americans? Yeah. Okay.
Hey, I really want that. That looks good.
Hey, let me try.
I'll use my credit card. Do you have any non-dairy creamer?
At 112 is A Nightmare on FaceTime. This episode parodies everyone's favorite horror movie, The Shining. Randy decides it's a good idea to buy a Blockbuster Video in 2012, when Blockbuster Video was already going downhill. He ends up going insane and almost murdering his family because, like I said, it's a parody of The Shining. At 111 is The Coon. The first part in what would later become a series, this episode mainly parodies The Dark Knight. Cartman decides that he needs to be the hero that the city deserves. However, this doesn't work out too well as he's consistently overshadowed by Mysterion, the much better and more likable hero. This pisses Cartman off to no ends, and he does whatever it takes to beat Mysterion. I think the best part of this episode is the fact that watching it, we don't know who Mysterion is, and even by the end, we still don't know who he is. It makes the reveal in the later episodes that much better. At 110 is Ginger Kids. Of course, as I mentioned before, any episode where Cartman is being horrible is generally a good episode. It's also, once again, classic Cartman taking advantage of any situation he's put in. He discusses how he hates gingers with a passion and how they don't have souls, so the others decide to make him a ginger to make him question his actions a little bit. This, of course, backfires as he rallies the gingers and promotes a form of ethnic cleansing. At 109 is Douche and Turd. This is, of course, a South Park episode that once again aged like fine wine. Sure, the idea of having an election between a giant douche and a turd sandwich was relevant back in the day, but as of the 2016 election, I think this is more relevant than ever. At 108 is Toilet Paper. Another episode I believe many fans underrate. It parodies Silence of the Lambs. When the boys TP their art teacher's house, they end up reacting like they just murdered someone, and the guilt gets the best out of Kyle. This leads to Cartman attempting to murder him, but only having a whiff of that, so it takes a while. Luckily, he doesn't get to murder him, and the whole case is eventually solved thanks to the Hannibal Lecter parody. At 107 is Sexual Harassment Panda. This is another episode that kind of feels a bit like a fever dream, which makes sense as Matt and Trey claim they don't remember anything about this episode or making it in any way, but the bizarreness of this episode is what makes it for me. Sexual Harassment Panda is just a great character all around, and the running bar gag is pretty hilarious in this one.
Hey, Panda Bear! We don't take kindly to your types in here.
Now calm down, Skeeter. He ain't hurting nobody.
Now, I want to know something from Mr. Panda Bear here. If you pandas are from mountainous areas of China and Tibet, how come you eat bamboo, which is prone to grow only in drier, more arid regions?
At 106 is Super Fun Time. The 4th grade class visits a living history museum that is set in 1864. All the actors at this museum have a very strict code of not breaking character, and to say they take that seriously would be a massive understatement. Even as they're taken hostage and slowly killed off, they still refuse to break character in order to save themselves. The only thing that eventually saves them is Stan's willingness to cave and act like they're in 1864. At 105 is Super Best Friends. The first of the several banned episodes of South Park. This follows
Svaka 2 dana mi se mijenja smene, ne.
Speaking of David Blaine, I've done a video on him, so if you'd like to check that out.
Evo ga, počekao Milan.
When Stan asks Jesus for help in taking
To je dobro koliko je loše. A ima i varijanta recimo da nedelju dana radiš prvu, pa nedelju dana radiš drugu, pa nedelju dana radiš treću. Nedelju dana kad radiš treću, znaš kad završavaš? Završavaš smenu u nedelju ujutro. Znaš. Samo da se setim. Da, u nedelju ujutro. Nedelju u 6 ujutro završavaš. treću smenu. I počinješ sutra u ponedjeljak. E sad, to ima bonus nivo kad radiš, ne. Da, upravo si. Pravo si. Ali zavisi gdje radiš, ima kod nas prva i druga linija. Meni bi odgovaralo više da radim na drugoj liniji po smenama, jer oni recimo rade od ponedjeljka do petka, ja mislim, dobro sećam. Ako se dobro sećam. Sad ne znam da li su im to okrenuli. U suštini imaš jedan radni dan manje. Imaš ti tu kolege s kojima radim koji su malo depresivni, zato što kao radi jedan dan manje, kao manje radni sati, kao manje mi zarada. Nego tebi koji radi 6 dana. Ja, meni je to retardirano ovaj. Instead, they murder the alien and find what is known as space cache on board his ship. When the intergalactic police stop by Earth and inform them of what the space cache is actually worth, every country on Earth begins to spend the space cache on some very unnecessary things. At 100 is the death camp of tolerance. Another early commentary from the show on political correctness. This one follows the boys as they're discriminated against and placed into a concentration camp solely because of their slightly intolerant views. It also follows Mr. Garrison and his mission to get fired from the school in order to sue the school for being intolerant. This episode also includes the great story of Lemmy-Winks, which really just rounds out the episode as a whole. At number 99 is Starvin' Marvin. I don't really have a lot to say about Starvin' Marvin. It's a pretty typical early on episode, but it's just a great episode all around. At 98 is Something Walmart This Way Comes. This episode has some deeper commentary on consumerism and capitalism in general. My favorite bit they do in this episode is when they're told that to destroy the Walmart, they have to destroy its heart. It's revealed that the heart is actually just a mirror, meaning obviously the true heart of Walmart is human desire, but they just ignore it and break the mirror, and that actually works, so I think that's pretty funny. At 97 is Naughty Ninjas. The boys decide they need to find a way to keep the homeless people out of Soda Sofa, aka Kenny's house. And the way they do this is by dressing up as ninjas and being very scary to the homeless people. What they don't realize, however, is that these ninja costumes look very similar to a certain terrorist organization, which they are eventually recruited by and begin to serve. It also includes this hilarious visual gag.
Scary. Gay. Scary. Gay. Scary gay. Scary gay.
Randy, what are you doing?
Scary gay. Scary gay. Scary
gay.
At 96 is The Last of the Mohicans. Another episode that's more relevant now than when it came out. This episode tackles the issues taking place at the US border. Butters goes on a wild adventure and eventually ends up in Mexico, where he becomes a legend among the local people. Even when he returns home, the legend of Mantequilla lives on in Mexico. At 95 is Simpsons Already Did It. This episode is a more meta commentary on an issue that Matt and Trey themselves have to deal with pretty regularly, that being writing ideas and finding out that the Simpsons already did it. Instead, in this episode, it's Butters being Professor Chaos, and every time he comes up with a good idea, General Disarray informs him that the Simpsons have already done it. At 94 is Rainforest Schmainforest. The boys are sent on a school trip to Costa Rica in order to help save the rainforest. When they get there and eventually get lost, though, they realize that the rainforest kind of sucks and it's not even really worth saving in their opinion. It also includes Jennifer Aniston doing the voice of their guide, which I think is pretty interesting. At 93 is Buddha Box. Once again, Cartman taking advantage of a controversial topic just for his own gain. This time he tackles anxiety, and he uses it as an excuse to get out of anything and everything he doesn't want to do. He's eventually reminded throughout the episode that, in fact, everyone has anxiety, and everyone gets nervous doing certain things, and he kind of just has to get over it. At 92 is Something You Can Do With Your Finger. This episode parodies boy bands and the life that comes with being in one. This is when Cartman was going through that weird phase where all he ever wanted was $1 million, and his plan to get it was to start a boy band. At first, Randy won't let Stan partake in the boy band because he himself had been in a boy band and it went horribly wrong. This is just an all-around classic episode with many bits that continued on throughout the show. At the 90 and 91st spots, we have Go God Go and Go God Go 12, I guess. These episodes are pretty genius, as Mrs. Garrison does her best to end religion as we know it, since she meets a new boyfriend who is an atheist. The belief is that religion is the cause of all the problems in the world, so they do end up ending it. But of course, this just leads to war over other things, like the name of the Atheist Alliance. Also, Cartman freezing himself and ending up in the future just to get a Nintendo Wii. That's pretty cool. At 89 is sponsored content. This is the first episode of season 19 that really digs into ads and how they affect our world. There's a lot of commentary on ads and how they are a part of our everyday life in ways that we wouldn't even expect. It does a pretty good job of showing us a dystopian future that we're basically currently living in. At 88 is overlogging. This episode is a commentary on the reliance that we've built on the internet, and the way they showcase that is by having the internet go out across the entire world, and with reports of there being internet out in California, everyone begins to head in that direction in what becomes an Oregon Trail parody. Everyone has their own reasons for why they need the internet, but of course Randy's is the best.
I haven't jacked off in over 2 weeks.
At 87 is Cartman Finds Love. Of course, no surprise here, another episode of Cartman being terrible. This time when the new girl arrives at school and she turns out to be black, of course...
Ajde, čujemo se malo kasnije, ja sam otišao u krevet.
Može.
Da jedno sat vremena pretpostavljam. Zdravi. Evo na take a nap. So take care.
Seth, here. Seth.
Of course, Cartman decides the only candidate to date her is Token. He does everything in his power to make sure that they get together. It also
Mm.